An Australian scientist is part of a team convinced it's found the remains of Noah's Ark.
For centuries, the story of Noah's Ark lived in the pages of the Bible. Generations grew up hearing about a massive vessel that survived a world-destroying flood. But there was one problem. No one knew where it ended up, and there was not even a single physical clue to prove the ancient story true. Then, in 1948, something unusual appeared near the Turkish-Iranian border that reignited one of the biggest debates surrounding Noah's Ark. A massive, perfectly symmetrical, 538-foot boat-shaped ridge emerged from the mud, and its size and proportions appeared remarkably similar to those described in the Bible. At that time, many skeptics said it was just a geological formation. But recently, scientists have studied it with advanced ground-penetrating radar. And what they found beneath this structure is undeniable evidence of the lost Ark. So what exactly did they find? And how might it solve the mystery of Noah's Ark after thousands of years? Let's dive in. The impossible shape. On May 19, 1948, something unusual happened in eastern Turkey. A series of powerful earthquakes and heavy rains struck a remote region near Mount Ararat. The ground shifted, mudslides moved across the hillsides, and parts of the landscape were suddenly exposed. According to local accounts, a Kurdish shepherd named Reşit Sarihan noticed something strange emerging from the earth. It was not a cave, not a ridge, and not a normal rock formation. What caught his attention was its shape. From a distance, it looked remarkably similar to the outline of a giant ship. At the time, nobody connected it to Noah's Ark. Villagers simply knew that a strange object had appeared in the mountains. And because the area was isolated, sitting just a few miles from the Iranian border, the discovery attracted little attention. For more than a decade, the formation remained largely unknown outside the region. Then, in October 1959, everything changed. During a NATO aerial mapping mission, Turkish Army Captain İlhan Durupınar photographed the area from above. What looked unusual from the ground looked even more extraordinary from the air. The outline was unmistakable. Stretching across the mountainside was a huge, boat-shaped formation, frozen in the landscape as if time itself had buried it there. The formation would later be named the Durupınar Formation, after the captain who helped bring it to the world's attention. In July 1960, an Australian publication called Pix magazine became one of the first major outlets to publish the aerial images. Just weeks later, the story started reaching a much larger audience. Newspapers picked it up, researchers started asking questions, and before long, the mysterious formation had become an international story. BBC film crews, National Geographic photographers, archaeologists, explorers, and biblical researchers all came to see it for themselves. And the reason was simple. For thousands of years, people had imagined what Noah's Ark might have looked like. Now, high in the mountains of Turkey, there was something that seemed to match that image almost perfectly. Biblical dimensions match. Inside the book of Genesis, the story of Noah's Ark has a very specific description. According to Genesis 6:15, the ark was built 300 cubits long, 50 cubits wide, and 30 cubits high. And if you convert this using the Royal Egyptian cubit, about 20.6 inches, the length comes to nearly 515 feet. That detail matters because Moses, who is traditionally believed to have written Genesis, was raised in Egypt, so the measurement system he knew would likely match Egyptian units. There is also another important detail in Genesis 6:16. The ark was described as having 3 levels or decks, built to survive extreme conditions rather than travel like a normal ship. Now, when researchers measured the Durupınar Formation in Turkey, something unusual appeared. The structure is about 538 feet long, almost matching that ancient 300-cubit estimate. Even more interesting, the overall shape keeps a consistent 6-to-1 length-to-width ratio, which is exactly the same proportion described in the biblical account. At first, many scientists thought it might just be a coincidence, but the shape does not just loosely match. It holds a very specific proportion that is rare for natural formations of this size over thousands of years. On the academic side, Professor Faruk Kaya from Ara Ibrahim Chechen University has also been involved in studying the site. His laboratory tests suggest the formation dates somewhere between 3,500 and 5,000 years ago. That time range is important because it closely matches the timeline built from the early chapters of Genesis, especially Genesis 5 and 11. These chapters list the generations from Adam to Noah, along with their ages and lifespans. When researchers add up these genealogies, many traditional biblical calculations place the flood event roughly 4,000 to 5,000 years ago. The measurements, the structure, and even the timeline are beginning to line up with the biblical description more closely than anyone expected. But even with all these similarities, one major problem remains. Because in science, a match in shape, size, and timing does not automatically mean origin. And when geologists look at the same formation, they see something very different. Nature or design? Even with all the growing interest in the Darupanar formation, many geologists were not convinced. In fact, they saw a completely different explanation for the same formation. One of the main arguments comes from something called limonite. Limonite is not a single solid rock. It is a mixture of iron oxides that forms naturally in soil and volcanic regions. Over long periods of time, iron-rich water moves through mud and slowly hardens it. In some cases, this process can take thousands of years, sometimes even more than 10,000 years, in active volcanic zones. This creates a crust-like layer that can look solid and structured from the outside. According to geologists, this process can easily create shapes that look artificial, especially in volcanic mountain regions like eastern Turkey. Then comes another explanation called a mudflow or landslide formation. Scientists say the Darupanar site fits what is known as a syncline structure. In simple terms, this happens when a massive flow of mud and volcanic material rushes down a mountain slope, sometimes at speeds of several kilometers per hour. If it hits a solid ridge of rock, the flow splits around it. When it settles and hardens over time, it can leave behind a long, symmetrical, boat-like shape in the ground. From this view, what looks like a ship is actually the result of natural pressure, movement, and erosion working together over a long period. This is why most mainstream geologists remain skeptical. They point out that laboratory samples taken from the site show basalt and iron-rich clay, not fossilized wood or any clear signs of human construction. In multiple analyses, the so-called ribs of the formation are identified as natural layers of hardened volcanic material. Another important point is the lack of physical proof. Despite decades of interest, no confirmed artifacts have been found inside the formation. No metal joints, no carved wood, and no man-made tools have ever been recovered in any verified scientific excavation. Instead, the materials match what is commonly found in volcanic regions around Mount Tenderek. So from the scientific side, the argument is simple. The shape is unusual, yes, but still explainable through natural forces. But right when this debate seemed to settle, something unexpected happened again. Deep beneath this site, scientists detected something that should not have been there. The underground anomaly. To understand what scientists discovered beneath this formation, we first need to understand how they studied it. Instead, they used an advanced technology, ground-penetrating radar, or GPR. This system sends high-frequency radio waves deep into the ground. When those waves hit something solid, or even an empty space, they bounce back to the surface. By measuring how long the return takes, scientists can map what is hidden underground, layer by layer, without ever touching the soil. But in the Darupanar project, it wasn't the only technology used. Andrew Jones and his team from Noah's Ark scans. They used advanced 3D ground-penetrating radar combined with electrical resistivity tomography, or ERT. This method checks how easily electricity passes through different materials underground. And based on those differences, it helps map hidden structures, solid areas, and empty spaces beneath the surface. So instead of flat images, they built a full 3D digital model of what lies beneath the surface, layer by layer, going several meters deep into the ground. And what appeared on those scans shocked the entire team. Across the entire structure, the radar showed long, parallel vertical lines running almost evenly from one end to the other. These lines were spaced in a consistent pattern, almost as if they followed a planned structure rather than natural cracks. Between these lines, the scans revealed empty pockets. These looked like internal gaps or compartments hidden inside the formation. Even more striking, the system picked up long horizontal channels cutting across the structure. Some of these looked like continuous pathways, but the most unexpected detail was the geometry. The scans showed sharp 90-degree angles where vertical and horizontal structures met, straight lines, clean corners, repeating patterns across a formation that stretches about 538 feet in length. This is where the tension grows. Because in geology, natural processes rarely behave like this. Volcanic mud flows and basalt formations usually create irregular cracks, curved shapes, or hexagonal patterns like those seen in places such as the Giant's Causeway. And that is why these findings stood out so sharply to researchers. A structure this large, showing this level of organized geometry, immediately raised a difficult question. Is this just an unusual natural formation, or something that once had a deliberate layout beneath the surface? At this point, Andrew Jones and his team were no longer just looking at a mountain ridge. They were looking at a possible buried structure, still locked beneath meters of earth, waiting for confirmation. And that confirmation didn't come from the scans. It came from something completely overlooked, something that was right under their feet the whole time. The evidence in soil. Over several field seasons, scientists collected samples from multiple locations both inside and outside the formation. What they found immediately caught their attention. According to tests conducted by soil scientist William Crabtree, the soil inside the formation contained between 2 and nearly 3 times more organic material than samples taken outside it. That difference was not spread evenly across the landscape. Instead, it followed the outline of the formation itself. Even the grass growing above it appeared different. Researchers noticed a visible change in color where the supposed structure began and where it ended, but the organic content was only the beginning. The team also found unusually high levels of potassium. In some areas, potassium concentrations were up to 40% higher than those found in the surrounding volcanic terrain. The gradual breakdown of plants and other organic material over extended periods. The pH levels inside the formation were noticeably different from those outside. The interior soil was more acidic, while the surrounding landscape was significantly more alkaline, because decaying organic material naturally releases acids into the soil. Over hundreds or even thousands of years, those chemical changes can leave a lasting signature in the ground. When Crabtree reviewed the combined results, he noted that the pattern closely resembled what scientists would expect to see if a very large wooden structure had slowly decomposed into the earth over a long period of time. Andrew Jones then compared those soil sample locations with the anomalies already identified in the radar scans. Professor Farooq Kaya and his team at Ara Ibrahim Chechen University dated these soil layers to roughly 3,500 to 5,000 years old, placing them within the same broad period that had already drawn so much attention. But even this did not prove the existence of Noah's Ark. Mainstream geologists point out that certain clay minerals can sometimes create similar chemical patterns naturally. Still, the data revealed something important. Whatever had existed within that boat-shaped boundary left a chemical fingerprint that survives to this day. And when researchers combined that fingerprint with the radar data, a much larger picture began to emerge, a picture that looked less like scattered clues and more like a complete design hidden beneath the ground, the buried blueprint. By this point, researchers had accumulated years of data. The radar scans had revealed strange underground patterns. The soil samples had uncovered unusual chemical signatures. Independently, neither proved anything. But what happened when all the evidence was put together? That question led Andrew Jones and his team to combine the different data sets into a single three-dimensional model. And, for the first time, they were no longer looking at scattered anomalies. They were looking at a possible layout. Running through the center of the formation was a long feature extending almost the entire length of the structure. Researchers interpreted it as a central passageway. On both sides of that passageway appeared a series of repeating sections arranged in a surprisingly organized pattern. Rather than appearing random, they seemed to branch outward at regular intervals. Then another detail emerged. The combined data suggested three distinct layers stacked above one another. That immediately caught attention because Genesis 6:16 describes the ark as having lower, second, and third levels. Again, this was not proof, but it was another similarity added to an already growing list. The deeper researchers examined the model, the more patterns they believed they could see. Near the outer edges were evenly spaced features resembling internal support ribs. Close to the center appeared a diagonal pattern that some interpreted as a ramp or stairway connecting different levels. What made these findings so interesting was not any single feature by itself. It was the way they seemed to fit together. The final paradox. Even though mainstream scientists and geologists don't fully agree with the idea of a man-made structure, let's slow down for a moment. Because if we look at the full picture, the comparisons with ancient texts start to feel far more serious. One of the strongest links comes directly from Scripture. In Genesis 8:4, it is written that the ark rested upon the mountains of Ararat. The original Hebrew word used here is Hare, which refers not to a single peak, but to the broader volcanic mountain region around Mount Ararat. And this is where the location becomes important. The Darupanar Formation lies exactly within that same region, in the Do-Bayazit district of Ara province, about 18 miles south of Mount Ararat. It sits high in a volcanic valley at nearly 6,500 feet above sea level. Not random land, but exactly the kind of high-altitude resting zone described in the text. Also, when we line up everything we saw earlier, the timeline, the measurements, and the soil findings, it starts forming a pattern that feels too consistent to ignore. And over the years, many well-known researchers have argued that it deserves serious attention. In the late 1970s and early 1980s, American explorer Ron Wyatt claimed the formation matched Noah's Ark. He pointed to its consistent length and unusual iron levels, suggesting they could be traces of ancient construction materials. Later, in the late 1980s, Turkish geologist Dr. Salih Bayraktutan studied the site through drilling and field analysis. He described the internal structure as unusually geometric for a natural formation, and said it deserved long-term scientific protection and deeper investigation. But for anyone who still wants solid scientific proof before believing anything, the possibility is still open. Because the truth is, this site has not been fully studied yet. And right now, research here is actually happening on a much larger and more advanced scale than before. So at this point, the answers are not final yet. But with the level of research now underway, It feels like it's only a matter of time before things become clearer. And what comes next could either solve one of history's biggest mysteries or make it even more complex than before. So what do you think about the Dura-Pinar Formation, and what could possibly be lying beneath it? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. If you enjoyed this video, make sure you give it a thumbs up. And if you don't want to miss any updates on this topic, don't forget to subscribe to the channel. We'll see you in the next video.